take a look at data collection. So several ways to collect data, very much like several ways to measure progress. You can collect data through frequency, duration, task analysis, which can be related to prompt level and independence, working on independence. Work samples or permanent products, intervals. That can also be during, like in the high school or middle school, so during different class periods could be the intervals. Accuracy, again, that percentage, level of independence. Again, the data collection must be aligned to the goal you've written, which is why thinking about how you're going to take the data when you're writing the goal is helpful. For example, if you had a goal that said, they were going to answer the math problem with 90% accuracy 4 out of 5 times, and then you say, as you're taking data or you're reporting progress, if you say, well, they're answering math problems at 73% accuracy, you want to also say how many times you've taken that data, like 73 on 4 out of 5. Here we go. Consider backwards planning when writing goals. So maybe even start with your data first. Like, how would I measure data? Okay, how can I write a goal that will allow me to use that data collection method?
I feel like this is a place where you can really work smarter, not harder. And I know this from not doing it in a super efficient way, but I wrote a beautiful goal for word parts, prefixes, suffixes, root words, that kind of thing. And the way I wrote it required a very specific kind of assessment that I ended up then having to create every time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wish that I had found a way to measure the same skill but in something that was more readily available, so I didn't put so much of a burden on me. So just something to think about. Okay, so there are lots of ways to take data. There are also lots of ways to kind of schedule how you do it. I've just listed a couple. I kind of wanted to talk to you guys to see what you do. But the biggest thing I can tell you is however you do it, just be sure to take it somehow. You want to be intentional about it, and you need to take it at least as often as the goal requires. You can certainly take it more than that, but you've got to cover at least what you say you're going to cover in the goal. So some examples are people do data days. You might do weekly or monthly probes. Also, if you need help, you're like, man, I've got so much going on, I don't know how I'm going to do this, I don't know what kind of data sheets to use, I don't know any of this, then you just got to ask. Because WCS is really blessed to have lots of great resources. Our autism folks and our behavior specialists are wonderful resources who seem to enjoy making data sheets and doing that kind of stuff. So ask them, and they'll be more than happy to help. All that said, don't ever make it up. That's bad. So don't ever, if you don't have it, you don't have it. But don't make up things that don't exist. Okay, a couple of tips and tricks here, just things that work for me. I have, when working with students, so I'll work with them on this worksheet or something, math problems, and I'll model the first few with them, and then I'll just highlight 5 or 10 that maybe they need to do on their own, that I can come back to that, so I can work with you, highlight, move on to the next kid, and then I know that they did those independently, or at least they were supposed to, and I can highlight the number that corresponds to the goal, so that helps me. Sticky notes are great. You can just jot stuff down using those permanent products and work samples. Simple data sheets. You think you asked about, how am I going to explain this to a parent? Well, simple is better. You don't want this really convoluted system. So pluses or minuses, I's or P's, independent or prompted, are really great tally marks. When you are having to rely on your parapros, be sure to really clearly define the behavior that they're working on and how they're going to measure it. I had a situation where we had somebody who was kind of inconsistent at working with this student, and we were just working on counting out objects. So each number, we're working on counting out little bears. And I noticed I would talk to one person, and they would say, yeah. So I'm having her say, okay, count 5, and she had to pick the 5 bears. Another person said, yeah, I put the bears out for her, and she 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a very different skill. So you want to just make sure that you really are on the same page, because that means different things to different people. So you don't want to put just count 5, you really be specific. And make sure they're understanding the way you collect it. Sometimes you'll run into, they'll take it their own way, and you still get the same information, but it's not the way you necessarily need it to be, and that's just more of an efficiency thing. But it helps you to not have to go back and kind of then recode what they've done. So we're just kind of doing that on the front end. High school folks, if you're in transition, what I found is really helpful is to group students with similar goals and then kind of plan your whole group or small group instruction around that. And then you can go back and hit the outliers and those individual things. Again, we're looking for, you want to be as efficient as possible because I know your time is valuable. Work boxes are great, centers, rotations, things like that. I put one of those little clickers over there if you're doing like frequency. Those are nice. I've heard of people that move things from one pocket to another, you know, because you're in the middle of doing something, so that's helpful. I got my highlighter there.
So up here, you see just two little examples, but you have a stapled packet that has some example data sheets. Again, this is so just like barely, it's not exhaustive at all. You know, it's just a little idea of some different ways I've seen it done. This top sheet in your packet is how one of the elementary schools that I work with does their data. You'll notice that there's not a lot of detail. But the people that are taking the data on this, even if it is a paraprofessional, they're very trained in exactly what they're looking for. So I will put that caveat in there that like when it says WH questions, they know exactly what it is they're looking for. But this is just a plus or a minus or a prompt, like plus P or minus. On the back of that page, we'll go through the packet. On the back of that page is an example we're using at one of my schools, particularly on, this is a BD BIP data sheet, but it gives you an example of how you might use your BD BIP data or BIP data towards, you can use that data when you're writing those PLEPs. And this also is just an example of how you can put several things you're measuring on one sheet. So, you know, not everything has to have its own separate data sheet. The goal tracking sheet is one of the examples up here. And this would work really well when you have that ability to like, you know, one-on-one or in the small groups, you have trials of a certain skill. Again, it has the same thing on the back, just without the example. And then the next one is just a trial sheet with only 5 trials versus the 10. That's just the progress monitoring, like with date, correct, and errors, like which we kind of get to do through our Ames web at the elementary at least. Play skills tracking sheet. This one is like you'll see what their goal was, their example. It's where they're looking at like different types of leisure items. So they have like hula hoop, frisbee, and they're listing them out. I adjusted this for a similar one about like time on task or attending to a group activity. And so here's where you would like measure duration that you saw during different group activities on those days. And so then you could like do that through, you would be able to see like, okay, you know, the most you could report progress as, you know, he's sat for 4 minutes and 23 seconds consecutively once, you know, however, he has not met the criteria. And then the last one, or the last two, this one that says class monitoring chart, I liked this, class progress monitoring, because if you did have like a small group, you can put all the kids on one sheet and then take the data for for the skill that you're working on. And on the back, it did not print very beautifully, but
this is something I made in Word really quick, just a chart for IMP. Just really easy, and you can put the kid's name and then just whatever it is they're working on, real quick, super simple.
Yeah. Which is kind of like this one, but just for one kid and one goal.
Bigger, easier.